You're listening to a podcast of The Mojo with Steph Renee. Weekdays 10 a.m. till noon on 900 AM WURD.com.
Again, from the album Wild Seed, Wild Flower, that is Dion Ferris with a song titled Don't Ever Touch Me Again. And we talk so often about this concept of empowerment, but rarely do we hear people singing about it in that kind of way. And so that's why I wanted to get that one out of the archives and reshare it on our airwaves today, so that for those people who find the idea of speaking about sexual assault, speaking about reproductive rights, any of these things that deal with parts of our body that our ancestors told us we didn't talk about in polite company, that we find ways to be able to broach the subject in a positive way and engage in conversation that gets everybody understanding that they are part of the solution. And so as we get ready to journey into that territory with our next guest, I want to make sure we welcome Mike D back to the studio. Good morning, sir.
Hey, Steph. I'm loving, is that a dashiki, a dress?
It's a dashiki dress, I guess.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well,
I'll be hosting at Creative Africa this evening, so I had to conjure up that spirit in my attire today.
So people that come out tonight will know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And so, we, of course, center this hour around conversations about film and television. And joining us now on the line is director Dawn Porter. I had the distinct pleasure of moderating a Q&A after her latest documentary, Trapped, was screened for the first time here in the Philadelphia area. A lot of organizations came together on Penn's campus to support that screening and have a conversation about legislatively what's happening in our nation around reproductive rights. And now it's getting ready to come on PBS.
Definitely, yeah. And I had a chance to see it at Sundance where it won the Grand Jury Prize.
Yes, so absolutely.
It's good to hear your voice again, Dawn.
Indeed. Welcome back to WURD.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you both. I'm really happy to be with you.
Well, we're glad to have you to help people who have not yet had the benefit of seeing your amazing film to understand the fact that, as a filmmaker, you do not shy away from difficult territory. You seem to dig into this documentary style road, with some zhuzh in terms of highlighting the realities that many people are dealing with in trying to bring justice to our community.
The reason my background is I'm a lawyer, but I worked for ABC News. I worked for A&E Television on the programming side. And the reason I wanted to become a documentary filmmaker is because I wasn't seeing real nuanced, true stories about issues that were happening in our community, in the Black community. And so that was my motivation. And, if you look, our stories are everywhere. And they're not only stories of pain, but they're stories about resilience.
Yes.
And that while some of the topics are hard, what I find makes me so proud. And that is part of what I try and share. Is that view of what's happening in our community and how we are helping ourselves.
Right, but what I like about your films, like Gideon's Army and now Trapped, is that you take these big issues that concern us all, but you put a human face on them.
Well, it can be really difficult to understand something like when you say a trap law or laws or abortion regulations. And what I wanted to do was show what those regulations, how they are affecting people every day. Because, a law is only as important as what it does for our lives. It can help us or it can hurt us. And so watching people who are struggling to comply with laws that are almost impossible to comply with, I wanted to show what that looked like. But also, I really particularly wanted to show trap laws have such a huge impact in the Black and brown community.
Yes.
And I felt like that was not being discussed. The face of a woman who is being turned away from having an abortion that she's seeking that is legal in this country is not usually Black or brown. And I wanted those women, their doctors, their providers, their stories to be front and center.
Right, and this being an election year, now just to clarify, so people might not have seen the film yet, can you just give a brief synopsis and talk about why it's so important in this election year that this movie be seen?
Yeah, I was making a film called Spies of Mississippi. It's about Spies of Mississippi is a film about the Mississippi Sovereignty Commission and how they tried to infiltrate the NAACP.
And I just want to jump in and say that I saw Netflix and came back here to the station and raved about it and made many of our millennial employees go watch it, because if I'm too young to have seen firsthand some of the things that happened during the civil rights movement, they certainly are much younger. And so we talked about that being a part of a stamp on their black card, if you will.
Oh, I'm going to come here every day. Well, so I was filming interviews in Jackson, Mississippi, thinking about state government, thinking about laws, and I read that there was only one abortion clinic in the entire state of Mississippi. And I was really surprised by that. Abortion is legal. I thought in a state like Mississippi and other states there would be more than one clinic. So I called them up and said, could I come over? And the first person I met was Dr. Willie Parker, who's an African-American physician. Dr. Parker grew up in Alabama, very poor. At the time I met him, he was working and living in Chicago, but flying to Mississippi, Alabama, states where there were no doctors, and providing abortions particularly because he saw the impact that having no abortion access was having in the black community for people who make that choice. And so he is a very well-trained physician. So he agreed to be followed. So I followed him and the clinics that he works in, but also clinics in Texas, for more than 3 years, and showed what it's like for them, for the clinic providers, but also for the women. One of the things I definitely saw was all women, I think, have a very serious decision to make if they decide to end an unwanted pregnancy. But a theme that kept recurring for the African American women and for the Latino women was, I cannot afford this child. And even where, people desperately wanted to have a second child, they felt like that was not the responsible thing to do for themselves and for their families. Many of them married, in a committed relationship, already had a child, and really struggling to improve their lives. And to make it more difficult and unsafe for these women who were making an excruciating decision, I felt like people needed to understand, black women, we can't win for losing. We're either Jezebels who are using abortion as birth control, or irresponsible, or we're having babies out of wedlock and we can't afford. So what's the right answer for us? And for me, the right answer is women, black women, white women, every woman should make a decision for herself. But when she makes that decision, she's entitled to safe care, and watching kind of what these laws do to the ability of women to access that care. That's the object of the film.
Absolutely. And I can say from the screening that we had here in Philadelphia a couple of months ago, the moment as people are kind of grappling with their own personal values as they watch this film and are dealing with the realities of what it takes for someone who has finally come to the place where they've made a decision that this is in their best interest and the best interest of their families, and then the expense of having to travel to a clinic in order to make this happen. And if anything happens legislatively during the process of trying to get to the clinic, or even on the day of them trying to receive these services and having to be redirected, what that means, the idea, and this isn't giving away the whole story. I just have to say, a family that comes and parks in the parking lot of a clinic and lives out of a RV in order so that this can happen for a member of their family. I mean, people can't even conceptualize that, especially when you live in a major urban area like Philadelphia, that for other people in other states that are dealing with this issue, that it is a much more complex issue if you don't have an immediate access to this in an urban center. We're talking about rural people, and suburban people, that it's a much more of a hardship.
That's exactly right. 90% of American counties have no abortion clinic. So people are traveling on average miles or more if you do not live in an urban center. I saw one woman, she lived in Gulfport, Mississippi. She traveled 10 hours by bus to Alabama, and then when she got there, she needed to do the 48-hour waiting period. So she needed to pay for a hotel. She was already trying to find childcare for her 6-month-old baby, which is why she felt she couldn't have another child right away. So the hardships for folks are real, and they, when you think about who is accessing a public clinic, it's often people who are lower income. So this is a real struggle and a real burden. And I didn't feel like that part of the story, the Supreme Court is about to make a major decision about whether laws like this are constitutional. And I really wanted, and I'm so happy that this film is getting out while the Supreme Court is considering this very question, is if we have a right to an abortion, but there are no clinics, what remains of our right?
Absolutely. And I think you did a great job also in showing that even though this is disproportionately burdensome to communities of color, that there are people from every stripe of life that are involved in this, from the provider side as well as those people who are seeking this medical treatment. And it's deeply complex when you layer that into the ethnic background and the gender of most of the people who are putting forth these blocking laws, if you will, these trap laws as you describe them, and the fact that they aren't living in these communities, they aren't associating with the people that are most deeply affected by these laws, and don't have any real context or frame other than what they're putting forth as their own personal values as the reason why they are so insistent upon continuing to enact these restrictive laws in their states.
That's exactly right. I mean, the overwhelming number of women who have abortions are white. Most are Christian. Many are married. And for the African American community and somewhat in the Latina community, you have women in greater numbers than our numbers in the population having abortions. And I think that that's the next area to be explored, because what I saw was such an intersection between income and choosing to have an abortion. So if we really wanted to end abortion, what we would be doing is providing folks decent living wages, great access to medical and contraceptive care, and probably sex education.
Yeah.
So to not provide those basic things and to take away the right to choose an abortion if you decide to make that choice. Not everyone's making that choice. But, my thing is, if you have chosen it, I want people to have the safe option to take care of their medical needs.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes, I mean, you definitely make a point. It's when it's illegal or not available, let's say, people will still find ways to do it, and that's cost many a life.
My grandfather was a physician. He practiced at Harlem Hospital in New York City. But in the summers, he would go and take my mother and her brother south to North Carolina. Like many black families would go have the summer in North Carolina, where he would do family medicine. And one of the things he did was abortions for women during that time. And so my mother remembers going and, my grandfather being paid in chickens and meals. But even then, we had doctors from the north, black doctors, traveling south to provide medical care for communities. And I'm wondering why 60 years later, we have people like Dr. Parker still traveling south to provide medical care in underserved communities. And I think that that's a real problem.
Yeah, so Trapped, we're talking to Dawn Porter, the director of Trapped, the award-winning film Trapped, which airs this Wednesday, right?
Yes, this coming Wednesday.
10 p.m. on Independent Lens. So it's, if you Google it, it's under Independent Lens here on PBS. What ways can we support? What can we do to help keep this movement going?
The thing you're asking folks to do is, if you are watching the film, tweet about it while you're watching, what your impressions are, what you're learning. But you can also call your PBS station or send them a note and say, thank you for playing the film. We're having a little bit of trouble in the southern stations. They're not all playing the film in appropriate time periods. So we want to give the love to the folks who are playing it and sharing the information, and encourage those who have made a different choice.
I think it's incredibly important here. Philadelphia is going to be hosting the Democratic National Convention at the end of July. And so this idea about some of the issues that people say are very important to them, but have not been part of the national conversation or the national landscape yet, being able to see this film now as people prepare their political advocacy, however that will manifest itself, or activism, is incredibly important, while all the delegates will be pouring into this city to have a conversation about not just who they nominate, but what the platform is, for us to make sure that we keep an issue like reproductive rights at the forefront, and healthcare at the forefront of our conversation about things that should be manifest in the way that people are voting in this election year, and taking this conversation back to their home states to make sure that it's not just a federal issue or a federal landscape that we're talking about, but what's happening right at home for so many people that need to have their voices be heard. And so we thank you for using your creative voice through the power of documentary to bring this story to us.
So I would like to take you two with me on every speaking engagement because you got out everything I would want to share. It is a thrill and an honor always to talk with you. I so appreciate it. Thank you.
Indeed. Well, don't be a stranger. So as you continue to bring these really difficult but necessary stories to film, we want to be able to engage you in conversation and make sure that we're elevating awareness of these films here on our airwaves. And so we hope this will be the first in a long series of conversations that we have with you about the great work you're doing.
Absolutely. I'm just going to move in and you get me a dashiki dress.
We'll do.
Okay. Thanks.
Don Porter, thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're going to take a quick break, ladies and gentlemen, and when we come back, we're going to extend this conversation even further. We're talking about how filmmakers are using their very powerful voices to bring issues of cultural and legislative concern to our faces, undeniably so, and allowing us to engage in them interactively. And we'll do that with the maker of Hidden Colors.
Tariq Nasheed's up next.
When we come back with more Real Black Radio here on the Mojo on 900 AM WURD. Stay tuned. That is some classic hip hop courtesy of X-Clan with the song Funkin' Lesson.
Professor X, rest in peace.
Indeed. Mike, do you understand? When I try to explain to people about the diversity of voices in hip hop that we had during what is now referred to as the Gold Age, X-Clan was one of my favorite examples of it didn't make a difference what the rest of the industry was doing. Really, they had their own groove, they had their own look, and they were absolutely unabashedly pro-black everything.
Yeah, it was at a time when the record industry was still afraid of hip hop, and a lot of people snuck their voices in. Nowadays, it's chocolate or vanilla.
Shout out to 4th and Broadway, because that was their label. And, the whole idea of being able to have a home for alternative, if you want to call it that, but certainly outspoken voices that were deeply steeped in our culture. And whether it's name dropping or whether it's full out lesson on wax.
Okay.
We got all of that from hip hop back in the day.
We've got X-Clan 2.0 on the line.
Yes.
With another outspoken voice. He is, and I want people to call in for this one because I know there are a lot of people have been influenced by this man's work. Local numbers 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900. He is a lecturer, a relationship expert, New York Times bestselling author, and the man responsible for Hidden Colors movies. The latest coming out on DVD this week. Brother Tariq Nasheed.
Welcome to WURD.
Hey, how are you, family? Good morning.
Hey.
We are glad to talk to you. And certainly, like I say, during Black Music Month, this is just the introduction to what you have been doing on film and live and lectures and all this in terms of spoon feeding us, our culture back to us so that we can have some substantive conversation about what we know and don't know.
Absolutely. And I wanted to be in a position where we could take control of the narrative of our history, because oftentimes we have outsiders telling us what we should talk about as far as our history, and that makes it watered down. So I wanted to give a version of our history that was true without any chase, without any watered down anything. So I just wanted to make it in your face.
Now, feel free to speak. Now, you were talking this week on your radio show about the death of black media. WURD is Pennsylvania's only black-owned talk media station, so we want you to keep it real here. This Hidden Colors has become a global phenomenon. It's the #1 best-selling movie on Amazon. It's selling out all over the world. I mean, when you started out this mission, did you know it was going to be such a huge thing?
I had no idea, brother. When we started the Hidden Colors series, we started in 2010, and it was a reaction to all of the subservient movies that we kept seeing from Hollywood. We kept seeing movies like The Help, The Butler, Precious, and a lot of people were complaining about it, but nobody was really doing anything about it. So I said, okay, let me get the funds together and let me do a documentary that's just all about African black history. And when we did the film, I had no idea what the reaction was going to be. I remember being in the theater the first time when Hidden Colors 1 came out, and I was kind of hiding just in case it was black. I could just sneak out. But after the movie was over, I looked in the theater, and people were just standing around just shocked about what they just saw, and nobody wanted to leave the theater. And this was after a 2.5-hour movie. So I said, okay, we have something here. And then it just took off from there.
Now, the latest one is called, is subtitled The Religion of White Supremacy.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, can you be clear, what is your definition of white supremacy?
Well, the definition of white supremacy is their definition of white supremacy. We got to understand this, because a lot of times people act offended over the word white supremacy, especially those in the dominant society. But we have to understand they gave us the term white supremacy. When you look at the forefathers of this country, they all said they were white supremacists. Thomas Jefferson said he was a white supremacist. Abraham Lincoln used the word white supremacy. A lot of the great forefathers, and I'm using great very sarcastically, they told us that they were white supremacists. So that means that white will dominate, control, and mistreat people systematically who are considered non-white. That's all white supremacy is. A lot of people mistake white supremacy with white extremists. Like a Klan member is an extremist. That's somebody who's openly walking around telling you they hate Negroes.
Right.
A skinhead is an extremist. A white supremacist is your local librarian who's they see a group of black kids walk into the library, they'll get on the phone and call the police. That's your average white supremacist. Your average white supremacist is a school teacher who will funnel the black children into special education as a way to segregate them. See, a white supremacist is anybody with speech, thought, and action who maintain a system of injustice. So that's what a white supremacist is, and that's why we wanted to break what white supremacy was down. We had to break it because black people have no clue. Black people think just because people in the dominant society are being nice to you, they couldn't possibly be racist. This is why so many black people are rallying around Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is no worse than Donald Trump. I don't know why people don't get that. The Clintons, they've done so much damage to black society, but all Hillary has to do is come around during campaign time doing the Millie Rock and the Nay Nay and the and then we'll forgive her. So we have to really understand what white supremacy is, and that's what we talked about in the film.
Right. Well, I mean, you do an excellent job of breaking it down. I mean, thanks for sending me the link. I'm still waiting for my DVDs. They're back ordered on Amazon. So I might have to go directly to the source, hiddencolorsfilm.com, and order a second copy. But you do an excellent job of just tracing from the very beginning of time almost how religion, how the military, how the government has been used to reinforce this idea of white supremacy.
Yes, and it started in Europe during the so-called Inquisition. That's where we first start to see the what we now know as white supremacy. We see people in the dominant society in Europe start to get a code of conduct so that they could survive, because we have to understand, a lot of people don't know that there were Africans called Moors who were running Southern Europe and other parts of Europe, and there was a religious connotation over that because they were practicing Islam. So there was a Christian backlash, but that Christian backlash also came in the form of white backlash. and it became a religious racial war, and that's where it started. We see the first resemblance of white supremacy coming in the Inquisition in Europe, and after the Europeans broke out and started to navigate the world, they saw that they were the global minority as they are now. White people are less than 10% of the global population. A lot of black people don't know that. So white people are a global minority, and here in the United States, they are projected to be a minority around 2050. So whenever you have people who are in power who are about to be a minority, they're going to do what they do in South Africa. They're going to have to buckle down on the white supremacist tactics. They're going to have to start funneling people and into greater institutions. And this is why we see so much vitriol and hatred towards black society with impunity now, because now they're starting to create an apartheid state over here, just like in South Africa, where you're going to have a minority ruling a majority.
Right. And, so I wonder how you process other filmmakers that do not come from our same, ethnic background, who speak to this in a way that I guess, they hope there will be some other kind of acquiescence on the part of the larger white community. And I'm thinking about Michael Moore, for instance. In Bowling for Columbine, he had a cartoon, and, people do things to try and dress the information up in a coding that may make it a little bit more palatable for people to actually think about it. And so he did a whole cartoon on America being founded on fear, that so much of what white supremacist culture has instituted here has been on the fear of being overthrown, on the fear of being outnumbered. And so the idea of outnumbered and outgunned, it has definitely been manifest during President Obama's tenure. How do you look at this as you present it from one perspective and lens, and see other people that are struggling trying to deal with the same subject matter in different ways?
Yeah, and Michael Moore, I love Michael Moore. I worked with Michael Moore before years ago. Good guy. He's one of the few people in the dominant society that will actually tell the truth about systematic white supremacy. Michael wrote a book called Stupid White Men
Yes.
years ago. You guys need to check that out, where he's breaking down systematic racism. So Mike is a writer, and I have a lot of respect for him. But unfortunately, people in the dominant society like Mike, they're far in between. There's only a few Michael Moores, Tim Wises, Jane Elliott. You have a few people who will tell the truth, but the mass majority, unfortunately, will maintain the system of racism, and they have no problem having a hateful indifference to what goes on with black people and black society. But Michael Moore, he's always been in the forefront. He's from Flint, and he was one of the main people out there trying to get some of those politicians indicted for poisoning all those black people out there deliberately. And I want to get into, I probably want to do a film on that, how black people have been poisoned in many subtle and not so subtle ways for years. Like with this lead poisoning. We talked about the lead poisoning in Hidden Colors 4 when you look at it, because that lead poisoning, that's old. They've been doing that with the freeway system in the 1940s and 50s. Gasoline used to have lead in it, and they used to put those highways and freeways right in the middle of black communities. So all of that lead and smog would go up into the black areas, and black people would die and get sick because of that lead poisoning. That was going on in the 1940s and 50s, heavy. They tried to lie and say it was because black children were eating the lead paint from the walls, but that wasn't the case. And that lead poisoning started to affect people in the white society. That's why they had to make gas unleaded. They had to take the lead out of cars. So that's old. They've been doing that, coming up with subtle ways to poison us, poisoning the water. Speaking of the water poisoning, there were white supremacist groups like Tom Metzger and all these guys who were plotting on poisoning black water supplies in black areas. So they've always come up with little sinister ways to sabotage black society. And this is why we got to stop having this naivete about how sinister white supremacy is, because they burn the midnight oil, coming up with ways to disenfranchise us systematically all the time.
Woo. Well, I was going to say that is the perfect place for us to pause this conversation so that we can pay some bills here at WURD. But we want to come back and that angle, this idea about our naivete, especially as we are in an election year, and the conversation that we need to have ongoing about, what frustrates people about lesser of two evils and all the other things that pour into the idea of having a revolution and rewriting society, is where I would love to come back and continue this conversation with you as we continue Real Black Radio. So everybody hang tight. Troy's going to be answering the phone, taking your calls. Get in queue, 215-634-8065, toll free at 1-866-361-0900. And we will continue with more of our conversation about hidden colors and the whole concept of white supremacy as we continue with Real Black Radio in just a moment.
We're back on Real Black Radio on the Mojo with brother Tariq Nasheed, whose latest movie, Hidden Colors 4, is out now on DVD. You can order it directly from the source. Support black businesses at hiddencolorsmovie.com. So we have on the line?
Yes, Tyrone is calling in from North Philly. Good morning.
And good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Hey, Tyrone. So hiddencolorsfilm.com, correct?
Yes. One of the things that I wanted to speak with the gentleman about, and first of all, I love you as always, my sister. I was watching Joe Frazier and Ali. I just happened to wake up one morning and about 3:30 in the morning, and they showed all of the trilogies of Joe Frazier and Ali. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, it was about 10 o'clock in the morning that I watched from about 3:30 in the morning to about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I jumped up and was going to the store. And the store, I went to the Spring Garden Cafe at 22nd and Spring Garden. As I was going in the store, Joe Frazier was coming out. And I said, "Hey, Brother Joe." I said, "Man, I just watched you and Ali go at it all night long." And he said to me, and I'm telling you, kind of hurt my heart. He said that, yes, and everybody's watching, but Ali nor I get a nickel from any of these, any of the programs where they show. I said, what?
Okay.
I said, y'all don't get no royalty, no nothing.
So your question?
Nothing. Yes, my question is, isn't that pretty much a sign of white supremacy that here we have, folks who are doing something where companies are making millions and billions of dollars, and the folks who is creating what people are watching get nothing.
Mm-hmm. Well, we thank you for that question, Tyrone, and Brother Nasheed. How do we deal with this idea of ownership of intellectual property and all the ways that we have contributed to the fabric of this nation and the world?
Well, that's the dynamic of this country. They've always done that since the minute we got here. It was all about exploiting our labor for their benefit so they can maldistribute the wealth and then pass that wealth down to their offspring. That's been the beginning of our relationship, and nothing has changed. That's the thing. People think that because they've moved around the Play-Doh, that it's not Play-Doh anymore. It's still the same old Play-Doh. And when it comes to creating stuff in sports, that's run like a slave system. Check out the book $40 Million Slaves. It talks about how athletes are treated as if they're on a plantation. They do all the work. The slave owners, which means the team owners, which are primarily white. This is why they lock a lot of black people out of team ownership. They get all the wealth and redistribute it and pass it down. Hell, look at my man out here in Los Angeles, Donald Sterling. Listen to what he was saying about his athletes.
Right.
He sounded like a slave owner. He was like, these are my athletes. Look at their bodies. And the way he was talking down to them or down about them, it's the same thing. And just like owning intellectual property, they always come up with ways to wiggle us up out of contracts because they understand that a lot of black people don't have the money to get proper lawyers. And a lot of times when white people come around black folks, they play the paternalistic role, and then we eat that up especially with college students who are about to get big contracts. The white guy comes down and plays the so-called father figure and earns the trust and confidence of the black family, and then the kid signs a contract that's going to rape him in the end. This is why so many athletes, especially NFL players, about 5 years after they retire, about 60 or 70% of them go broke and bankrupt.
Yeah, and plenty of them are committing suicide as well. Absolutely.
So, they've always tried to manipulate us out of money, out of record contracts, look at the Bobby Shmurda situation. Look at the situation with that kid, Bobby Shmurda. Now, this is real slick. Now, Bobby Shmurda had the hottest record on the street. He was an independent artist.
Mm-hmm.
That song, Hot Negro, it was the hottest song in the world. He signed with Epic Records, goes to jail. Epic won't bail him out. Now, Epic owns the rights to the song. A lot of people they're not connecting the dots. So now this man, he sold the rights to his songs. He probably got like a couple of $100,000, which they probably blew in a week. And now the white corporation owns the music catalog that he has, and he's stuck. See, that's why Michael Jackson didn't play that game with Epic Records and Sony. Michael didn't play that game. Michael went over their heads at Epic and all those people, and he went over to Japan and went to the Japanese executives at Sony, and then he cut a deal with them because Michael understood that there's an old boys club here with the record executives. They don't care how much money you have. They don't let you buy into that big circle. But he went over their heads. He went to Japan and then got a hold of those catalogs, and that's why they targeted our brother.
Right.
They've always been hell on us about owning intellectual property, and they will literally kill you if you get the intellectual property behind their back.
Amen. Preach, brother. So, I mean, we only have a few minutes left, but I did want you to touch on, and also in Hidden Colors 4, there's a nice anecdote about the Harvard Black Music Study that also deals with that. But I just wanted you to, talk about the difference between white supremacy and white privilege, which is a phrase that we're hearing quite a bit this year. And what's your thoughts on the Stanford rape case?
Yeah, people use the term white privilege as that's kind of a watered down way to say white supremacy, to make it seem like a person has a choice, whether like it's optional, whether they have the ability to practice white supremacy. White privilege is kind of it's a nice way of talking about white supremacy. It wasn't white privilege. All of that was systematic white supremacy. This guy getting that slap on the wrist in that rape case where you have black men being targeted by all types of organizations. They had a whole street harassment campaign where you had these white feminists trying to get laws passed to help prosecute black men just for saying hello to people on the street. They're trying to get laws against that, where they got this white guy out here raping people. And that's not new. There's another case in New York recently that nobody knows about. There's a white cop went into a black woman's home and raped her. He's not getting jail time. So this raping thing, where white males can rape with impunity, they've been doing that, especially if the female victim is black. You go back to the Jim Crow era, there's so many cases of black women being raped that they swept under the rug. It's ridiculous. And this is one reason why the white feminists don't really bring in black women in their circles like that, because then you're going to have to start addressing all of those white males raping black women, because the white feminist movement, they like to project the black super predator rape theory caricature so that they can get funding, because that stereotype of black men going around raping, that's always a big moneymaker. That's why Bill Cosby, they're making a lot of money projecting that image of Cosby. And they're getting laws passed based on the alleged Cosby rape that he's never been convicted at all. In Nevada, they changed the statutory laws. They changed the law where instead of 4 years, instead of 4 years, you can go back 20 years if somebody made a rape claim. You can go back 20 years and say they raped you because of Bill Cosby. They did that strictly because of Bill Cosby.
Wow. Well, Brother Tariq, I really appreciate you being on the line. Hidden Colors 4 is out now. Where can people keep up with you?
They can follow me on Twitter at Tariq Nasheed. Again, go to hiddencolorsfilm.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Tariq Elite. So all those good places. And I look at your stuff too, Mike. I love looking at your stuff, especially if you get cussed out by Rex.
Yeah, I appreciate you put me on blast, but it's all good. I saw the check, brother. So it's all good. We have more of that to come. We'll have to talk some more offline or whatever. But thanks again. Really, Hidden Colors. He's been waking up people since 2010.
Indeed, and we appreciate all the work that you put into giving us this all this material as food for thought and conversation. It doesn't do us any good as a community to just watch the film and then go on about our lives the way we always have. We've got to be able to watch these films and then have conversation about all the things that you bring up so we can develop some more plans about what we're going to do about it.
Yes, ma'am. That's why we have solutions at the end of every film. So absolutely, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, family. Bye-bye.
All right, peace.
And so we got just a couple seconds remaining.
Real quick. Well, hopefully, I know you have an event tonight.
Yes.
But we have United Bank Building, tribute to Muhammad Ali. We're showing a very rare documentary about Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. 7 p.m. United Bank Building. Admission is $5. And then just a heads up, this week on DVD, Zootopia is out. Yes. So, I got that. And Roots, the original miniseries, is out now on Blu-ray. And coming out this Tuesday is Underground. So if you didn't get a chance to see it, you can buy it Underground with the WGN series.
Yes, I was going to say that's one of the ones I have to binge watch at some point when I sit still over the summer.
Yeah.
And just watch it on demand, the whole series.
And, hopefully Brother Tariq will get those links up soon so people can download the Hidden Colors. But,
yes,
very eye-opening, enlightening content. So
indeed. Well, it has been
Black and Noble should get it.
Yes. I mean, it's been a great show, sir.
Yeah, it went by fast.
Once again, just beautiful. We continue to strive to bring you these wonderful filmmakers who are using their craft to serve us up necessary information. And so we do hope that you will follow up on the links, follow up on the viewings that people are having of all this great film. And Mike D, I guess you'll be flying solo a little bit next week. We'll talk about what that will mean because I won't be here. But I look forward to communing with you on air again in the not too distant future as we bring more good stories about good Black folks.
Yes, and be the change you want to see.
Indeed. We'll be right back with more Mojo after this.
You've been listening to a podcast of The Mojo with Steph Renee. Weekdays, 10 a.m. till noon. Follow us on your favorite social media like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for up-to-the-minute information at 900 AM WURD.